There's an old joke about a woman who catches her boyfriend with another woman, and when she confronts him, he denies it and he says, "Who you gonna believe? Me or your lying eyes?" And that joke feels incredibly relevant today because even though we have cameras everywhere, it seems like it's impossible for all of us to agree on what it is that we're actually seeing. People film the cops film the people, someone's ring cam films the people and the cops, and there's a flock camera up on the lamppost that films the people, the cops, and the ring cam. And we still end up arguing over what all those videos are showing. What's going on? Quite a bit, actually. Making sense of what we see is a complex cognitive process. And more often than not, when people disagree over what video evidence is showing, it ain't our eyes that are lying. We need to understand this cognitive process if we want to become less vulnerable to propaganda and manipulation. And to do that, let's take a look at that time the US Supreme Court decided a case pretty much on vibes. Disputes over what video evidence clearly shows are not limited to internet comment threads. Sometimes even Supreme Court justices can't agree on what it is they're looking at. In 2001, police in Coweta County, Georgia tried to pull over a speeding motorist named Victor Harris. Harris refused to stop and took off, kicking off a high-speed chase that only ended when Officer Timothy Scott rammed Harris's vehicle, causing it to flip over. The crash left Harris a quadriplegic. Harris sued Scott for using excessive force. The Coweta County Police attempted to have the case thrown out, claiming that Scott enjoyed qualified immunity for actions carried out in the performance of his duties as a police officer. To support their claim, they submitted dashcam video of the chase as evidence. The district court ruled in favor of Harris and said the case could proceed. The department appealed, and the circuit court also ruled in favor of Harris. The department appealed again, this time to the Supreme Court. And that's where something interesting happened. The Supreme Court, after viewing the same dashcam video that the lower courts thought favored Harris, ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the police and dismissed the case. They found the dashcam video so compelling that it was almost the entire basis for their decision. It's believed that this is the only Supreme Court case that's ever been decided solely on the basis of sensory impressions. The only dissenting justice was John Paul Stevens, who felt that the tape was open to interpretation and that the case should go to a jury. Stevens, who was 87 at the time, wrote of his fellow justices, "Had they learned to drive when most high-speed driving took place on two-lane roads rather than on superhighways, when split-second judgments about the risk of passing a slowpoke in the face of oncoming traffic were routine, they might well have reacted to the videotape more dispassionately." Basically, his dissent boiled down to, "My fellow justices drive like girly men," which is incredible. Justice Antonin Scalia, perhaps stung by Stevens' suggestion that he grow a pair, took the unusual step of releasing the dashcam video to the public and wrote, "Justice Stevens suggests that our reaction to the videotape is somehow idiosyncratic and seems to believe that we are misrepresenting its contents. We are happy to allow the videotape to speak for itself." Scalia believed that after seeing the video, no reasonable person could possibly dispute the court's conclusion. A team of researchers led by Yale University's Dan Kahan took him up on that challenge. They gathered what they considered to be a diverse, representative group of American citizens, gave them the facts of the case, and had them view the dashcam video. A majority of the study participants did ultimately agree with the Supreme Court, but not nearly as overwhelmingly or as strongly as Scalia assumed they would. Why not? Well, Kahan found that a multitude of factors influenced the participants' responses to the video, including their political beliefs, their gender, their income level, where they were born, previous encounters with law enforcement, and more. The spectrum of reasonable responses to the dashcam video was far wider than the concurring justices had anticipated, suggesting that Stevens was right and that the case should have gone before a jury. Kahan's findings reflected the rich, bubbly gumbo of psychological mechanisms and cognitive biases and logical fallacies that we use to make sense of visual information, especially visual information that contradicts our deeply held beliefs or flies in the face of something that we assume to be factual. One of those psychological mechanisms is called the culpable control model of blame. When we see something like that dashcam video where innocent people are actively put in harm's way, we have a psychological need to identify the person responsible, or simply put, we want to blame someone.
We're all trying to find the guy who did this and give him a spanking.
Our instinct is to blame someone who is culturally different from us. In other words, someone who's not in our tribe. We then have to determine if the person acted voluntarily, and that decision can be influenced by whether or not the person engages in behavior that our tribe disapproves of. So, if our tribe disapproves of drug use and we find out that the suspect in a crime is a drug user, we are more likely to blame that person, even if that person's drug use had nothing to do with the crime in question. Another factor that influences how we evaluate visual evidence is called cultural cognition of risk. This theory posits that we decide what constitutes dangerous behavior based on things like our cultural background and our upbringing. If you grew up in a city, you might not think twice about taking the subway at night, whereas someone from a rural area might think you're insane for even considering it. Cultural cognition of risk might be why Justice Stevens thought that video didn't look that bad. And it's definitely why I'm glad I never got in a car with John Paul Stevens. Then we have identity protective cognition. As we've covered in previous videos, humans are extremely tribal creatures, and we place great value on maintaining our status in the tribal groups we belong to, both online and in the real world. That means when we see something that confirms our tribal values and beliefs, we all turn into Fox Mulder. When we see something that challenges those beliefs, more often than not, we simply reject it completely, or we start to twist it around in our heads in order to force it into an interpretation that conforms with our existing beliefs. Finally, when we're evaluating video evidence, we also have to contend with our naive realism. We all have a natural belief that we are rational people whose lived experience makes us good judges of the world around us. And if I'm a rational person, then everybody who agrees with me must also be a rational person. And the ones who don't, well, they're nuts. This is where most online arguments start. Naive realism is a major reason why we are vulnerable to propaganda and disinformation. And who knows, maybe Justice Scalia fell victim to this when he released the dashcam video. As you can see, evaluating visual evidence is a complex process with a lot of potential failure points. And this whole process only gets messier when influential or powerful people inject themselves into the mix and start telling you what it is you're seeing. Dan Cahan conducted another study in which participants were shown footage of a turbulent street protest disrupting an unidentified business. The footage was altered to make it impossible to read the text that was on the protester signs. In the footage, a pedestrian is seen approaching the business but turning away due to the protesters blocking the sidewalk. One group of study participants was told that the business in question was an abortion clinic and the person who turned away was a patient. Another was told that it was a military recruitment center and that the person who turned away was a student. At this point, it should come as no surprise to you that the participants' reaction was based on their cultural and political beliefs. But the thing is, they had no real evidence to go on other than what they had been told. They reacted to what they were told they were seeing, not to what they were actually seeing. And we've seen this effect in the real world. During the 2025 Los Angeles wildfires, a video purportedly showing widespread looting in the city went viral. But there was a problem. The people shown in the video weren't looting, they were evacuating their own home. That didn't stop the false claims of looting from spreading far and wide, based only on what people were told the video was showing. This is problematic, obviously. No one puts a video up on the internet without first telling you what it is you're supposed to be seeing, and maybe they've given it a cool rage-baity headline and a nice thumbnail. Not that I would ever do that. So what happens is that we start forming impressions about what we see before we even see it. We're also not terribly good at recalling what we've seen. In yet another study, 2,000 participants were shown a video of a purse snatching and then asked to pick the culprit out of a police lineup. 75% of them picked the wrong person. And many of them later admitted that they couldn't remember what the culprit looked like at all, but they felt pressured by the police lineup setting to just pick someone anyway. Studies like this and the cases that I mentioned above have some experts in the law enforcement community starting to question the value of eyewitness testimony and suggesting that we stop treating it as the gold standard of evidence. And as I've said dozens of times now in my videos, AI is making the problem worse. Left-leaning slop is now as prevalent as right-leaning slop. The economics of slop mongering are weird, and America's polarized political nature has turned it into a gold mine for slop profiteers. Although, I have no idea why you'd spend money on AI when apparently, as we've just shown, you can just tell people what they're seeing and they'll probably believe you.
It's a dingle hopper.
To wrap up, I am not suggesting that you disbelieve everything you see. Sometimes video evidence is exactly what it looks like. But when you see a video, especially a disturbing video, and everyone is arguing about what the video really shows, the first person whose arguments you should dissect is you. Run through some of the concepts that we've discussed here and make sure you're not tricking yourself into seeing something that isn't there. And this goes double if you agree with the content of the video or you respect the person who shared it. Doing this will make it harder for propagandists to manipulate you and make you more resilient to slop, no matter how tasty that slop might be. I'm going to do something a little different with this video, and I'm going to pin the sources page in the first comment. People haven't been reading the sources page, and you should. There's a lot of good stuff there. It's just a Google Doc, so I'm not fishing for more clicks when I ask you to take a look at it. That's it for now, and as always, thanks for watching. No, there's definitely a cat in my shot. Hey, kitten. Okay. Off with you. No, no. One more time without the cat.